part 2. And this is kind of more nitty-gritty, getting started with the process. So I want to ask a question real quick, and I actually want people to respond to me. This is not like a, wow, I have words or what I do, and I can't think of a rhetorical question. Books, what books or sermons or stories or songs or paintings, I put changed your life, but you might just say have had a profound impact on you. So the reason I'm asking us to talk about like what stories or songs or books have like really moved us is because when you can get to like the pure gold nugget of what it is inside of us that wants to create, that's the type of thing that comes out of a person. And if it was just for like, and people say this all the time, and it can sound cheesy, but it's so true. If God has put a book or a song or a poem or whatever inside of you, and only one person reads it and has the reaction that anybody in this room shared about the reaction that they had, would you say that was worth it? To take the time and the effort to be like, oh my gosh, like we just bridged the gap between heaven and earth with that one song for that one person or that one story. Like they had a profound encounter with the Lord. It's worth it. So here's like, for me, like here's just, when I think about like my favorite paintings or movies or preachers or music or books, like I could tell you for each of the images up here where I was and what I was doing and what season of life I was in when I encountered something up in this image that absolutely drew me closer to the Lord. I can tell you that like in 2016, I was experiencing a tremendous crisis of faith after experiencing some really harsh mistreatment from the church. And I didn't know like how much of this I wanted to keep myself attached to. And then I saw the movie Silence about missionaries in Japan who were being persecuted for their faith and wrestling with the doubt and that tension of faith and doubt in the face of tremendous pain. And I left that movie theater like and just sat in my car and wept and said, Lord, I'm all yours. I'm so sorry that there was even a thought in me about leaving. Or I could tell you that like when I was experiencing one of the most profound bouts of depression I ever had, and I wasn't even sure if I wanted to wake up the next day, I read Henry Nouwen's The Inner Voice of Love, A Journey from Anguish to Freedom, and I had someone who was there who was able to give words to that pain that I didn't have words for, that was so acute inside of me. Or I can tell you about the first time I saw Rembrandt's The Return of the Prodigal Son, that painting right there in the center, in a season of my life where it was just so hard for me to believe in God's love. And I had read The Prodigal Son 1,000 times, but when I saw that picture, I just had to sit for a couple hours and just take it in. Because it's one thing to read about it, it's another thing to see this painting and to see the father just embrace that dirty, clearly abused and hurt and troubled kid. I can tell you about Switchfoot and how pretty much every album they released has a song on it that is speaking to me in my season of life. But particularly right around when I saw Silence, they released an album and one of their songs was called I Won't Let You Go. And I can tell you like about where I was sitting on the couch and just weeping. For this, it's not even one of their bestseller songs. It's a song most people don't even know. But I just listened to it and it just was, in that moment, like whatever John Foreman and the band were doing, like it spoke directly to me. It was like a direct line to God's love. I can tell you about the first time I saw John Tyson preach a sermon. And I could be like, for the rest of my life, I want to be able to preach like that. Like I want to be able to preach with that much love and that much authority and with that much like authenticity and have there be no like pomp and circumstance or theatricality about what I do. Like, so I can tell you like these things matter deeply. They shape and they change lives. And again, I go back to this thing. These are all people who have had massive like acclaim and massive outreach with thousands and thousands of people who have interacted with their work. But again, if it's just one thing you do, and it has that kind of impact on just one person, you are moving the kingdom of heaven forward. Like it is worth it to put the effort in to do it. So I want to talk about how we get started in the creative process. And there's two things in here, 2 quotes I want to get started. Now, I'm coming at this from nonfiction writer, sermon writer perspective. I think a lot of this can translate to storytelling. A lot of it can translate to whatever type of writing you're interested in. This is what I have experience in, so this is what I'm working with. Brené Brown said, clarity is kindness. And Charles Spurgeon says, if it's a mist in a pulpit, or I added from the keyboard, it's a fog in the pew or wherever someone is reading what you wrote. The idea is as you're writing and as you're presenting ideas, you want to be as clear as possible. You don't want people having to work too hard to decipher what point you're trying to make with this. You don't want long run-on sentences. And I'm going to get to how you do that in just a second. But right now, I'm just like trying to make the point. As you set out to write, there's something inside of you. You're trying to get it out there on paper. You're trying to bring expression to what's inside of you. And I'm saying like the best thing we can do is bring a lot of clarity to what we're doing. So before I write any sermon, before I write any book, before I write any chapter or blog post or whatever, this is the process I walk myself through. The first thing is I ask questions for greater clarity. And these are the questions I ask is what is the one thing I want the reader or the listener to know? If I'm writing a book, it's my thesis statement for the whole book. If I'm writing a chapter, it's my thesis statement for that chapter. If I'm writing a sermon, it's for the whole sermon. What's the one thing that I want my reader or listener to know? And then I ask, why do I want them to know it? Why do you want them to know the one thing? And a lot of this, like you might put a lot of words to answering these questions, and those exact words may never actually make it to your book or sermon or blog post or whatever. This is for you. This is to help you give yourself clarity to what you're trying to write. One thing you want them to know, why you want them to know it, how do I want them to be impacted by it? Do I want them to have that, I just had a shift on what it means to be a human being from an earthly perspective to a divine perspective? Do I want them to have, I just started weeping because I'm overwhelmed by the Lord's love for me? What kind of impact do you want people to have as they're engaging with what you're writing and putting together? And then the next question is what's at stake if they're not impacted? And by that I don't mean, oh gosh, I'm not a very good writer and now I'm insecure. I mean, like, what if you had never read that book? Or what if you had never read Narnia or the Space Trilogy or heard those songs? Like, what's at stake if the impact that you're going for doesn't happen? And then the last thing is, like, how will I help them remember that one thing that I want them to know? What story am I going to pull? What illustrations am I going to use? What data do I need to do? Research do I need to do? How am I going to help them remember that one thing? And then I go in a little more in depth. This is a grid I have for crafting books and chapters and sermons. Again, for every book, for every chapter of each book, and for every sermon I write, I run the content through this grid, and the whole point is to bring clarity to what we're trying to do. Because if people have to work to interpret what you're saying and what you're doing, then you're probably not going to keep them for reading the rest of what you wrote. So the first thing is if you could summarize everything you're trying to do in one sentence, everything you're trying to say in one sentence, what would it be? A lot of publishers will call this the elevator pitch. So if you'd submit a book for publishing, you're going to get like, let's say you go with InterVarsity Press or Zondervan, they're going to send you like outlines of what they're looking for in their pitch for the book that you're wanting to write. And this is always going to be in the proposal. Is what is the one, if you can summarize everything you're wanting to say in one sentence, what would it be? And then, what are the 2 or 3 one-sentence points that support your main idea? So, my main point, I just did a sermon at our church on generous belonging. My main point is that Jesus' table is big enough for all of our messy stories. My 3 points are going to be 3 points that kind of illustrate what that looks like in the real world for real people. Then what you're going to do after that is what is your intellectual support? So now that you know what your main idea is, now that you know what your main points are, like what are you going to do to actually give authority and meat to what has been put on your heart? What scripture do you need to dive into? What data points do you need to read? What experts do you need to engage with? What articles do you need? What quotes inspired this main idea in you? And then what's your emotional support? You don't want to bore, it's a sin to bore people with your work. You don't want to bore people with it. So how can you bring something in there that is going to spark either joy or laughter or outrage or sadness or move them, whatever it is? What's your emotional point? This is personal stories, it's illustrations, it's ways to make this come to life. Then you're going to write a compelling conclusion. So the last thing people hear or read is going to be the thing they take away most from what you wrote. So you want to spend a lot of time making sure that how you're landing the plane is done with a lot of care and attention. And then the counterintuitive piece of all of this is after all of that, then you write your introduction. You write your intro last because you don't know what you're introducing until the content's all out there. So you're going to go back, and again, similar to your conclusion, whether it's book or sermon or blog or whatever, your intro is going to be where people decide whether or not they want to keep reading or listening. So you want to put a lot of effort into your introduction. I have a note in my phone, like a file in my phone, that is literally like 300 plus ideas I've had for intros for different sermons and talks, things that I have heard or seen, and I was like, oh, that's really compelling. I'm going to log that away because I want, when I start my next talk, I want people to be able to hear that and be leaned in for it. And then this is giving it texture. This is making it come alive a little bit more. This is, what do you want your audience to think after engaging your work? What do you want them to feel? That's a big one. Before you start, like before you get 30,000 words in or whatever with your project, thinking about like what emotions this is an emotional engagement. What emotions do I want to have stirred up in the people who are engaging with what I've written? This is a big deal when you're writing music. What do I want people to feel? Do I want them to be pumped up? Do I want them to be excited? Do I want them to be in a more contemplative state? Do I want their heart and their soul to be a little more open, to be in touch with their feelings? What do you want people to feel with your work? What part of yourself is coming out in this work? Everything you create is exposing a piece of you. Everything you create is exposing a piece of you. Before you let other people see that, be super aware of what part of you is coming out in that. My first book is my story. There's a lot of very, very sensitive stuff in there. Most of it, I was prepared to have people be exposed to let people see. But there was a few things in there that to me just seemed kind of like peripheral, not a big deal, that were some of the things I got some of the biggest feedback for. And I was like, whoa, I did not want people to have that perception of me. I didn't want that being out there. So when you're writing, as you're going through what you've written, I want you to be super self-aware and ask, what part am I exposing to other people as they engage with this? And then the last thing is, how do you want this to challenge, change, or shade the way they see the world? And then just for the last bit, never forget you're God's beloved. Chase vocational calling, not vanity. Work hard, get feedback, and be brave. Because this is a scary process, and it takes courage to do it, and it takes courage to get feedback.